Today I want to talk about conscious parenting, and the idea was actually it's been on my mind for a long time because I love kids, they love me, and I was wondering how I can help them. And I was also a part-time mother in the past, and when I was a mother with my ex-partner, I was actually I think I was very bad at it because I was actually reproducing what I had received that was wrong. For example, my father was very, very controlling and didn't allow us to be who we were. So I was also trying to control this kid, and very often in my mind I ask forgiveness to that kid. Um, and I hope he's not hurt because of that. I'm not gonna cry. So people can change. Very often through very difficult time we awaken. And something else I was also repeating with him was the behavior of my mom, who isn't able to process her emotion, who had a lot of anger and was throwing it at us. I'm a very different person now than I was. So I read this email by Daily Om. Daily Om is a website where you can take online classes, for example, and you pay what you can. So I think it's an amazing concept for the future. And they send emails every day, and it's always very honest, very grounded in reality. There's no spiritual bullshit that everything is beautiful. It's really about the reality. And they were explaining what is conscious parenting. It's actually accepting the kid as they are, and if we do that, then the adults that actually live in the world, like me, won't need to do as much work maybe when we awaken, because when we had like mostly negative self-belief and we're completely unable to be ourselves, when we're unable to express our emotions, whether it was sadness, anger, frustration, being able to oppose, being even forbidden to cry, or told that you cried too much, or that you had to stop crying with your tears of a crocodile like my dad did. It's not about blaming, but it's about, okay, what can we do better now? And it's about understanding that they did what they can because they didn't know better. And it's probably based on the pain that they had inside of them, just like the way I did with this little Eric. I was suffering a lot of, when I knew him at 6, he could barely talk. And I didn't realize that his parents didn't help him because they were also suffering inside and they didn't know how to help him. So I took the job of trying to fix, and finding all the solutions, which I shouldn't have done because it wasn't my job. And also eventually I found a therapist for him, and the therapist didn't include me in the process, which I was really surprised because I was spending as much time with him as his mom. And I think that every parent would have been included, or every person in his life, because if I would have had to change something to make his life better, then I think it would have been good. Anyway, all of that to say that I think the future for organizations like UNICEF and all the organizations who help kids is to actually focus on the parents. Because if we have parents which allow us, which accept kids as they are, as completely different, with different tastes, different personalities, different ways of being, different sensibilities, sexual orientation, whatever, different ways of seeing the world. And this is the job of parent, if you decide to have a kid, it's not to offer yourself a gift or to project yourself in the world. You're bringing someone to the world who is borrowed to you, and it's your job to push that person to be the best version of themselves. So I think this is where I believe organizations who help kids should go. And so this is my input on that, because we have the right to have different opinions. And I've been going lately in organization where I live, and I see that they focus a lot on kids, and I've asked questions to see if they know that there is an impact, but they don't really know. And a lot of people I know also have been deny the right to be themselves, and there are huge impacts in the future. And there's an amazing book I've heard of on Empower Radio by Dr. Terry Orba. No, sorry, that's the show. Her name is Lisa Lieberman Wang, and it's called First You Love Yourself. And her story is very similar to mine. Her dad actually wanted to have perfect kids with perfect grades, perfect behavior, blah 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 blah, just like me. You know, eventually she was very sick, and she had like many things that she didn't know of. And I was the same when I was young. I always had like, you know, things that no doctor could know how to get rid of, like for example acne, or you know, I was always like the example of the extreme. And I think it all came out to the fact that I wasn't allowed to be myself. So as she explains in her book, you know, the only way to receive love is, in a way, is to get sick, to get attention, and to be taken care of, because you're not allowed to be loved as you are and taken care of when you are just yourself. So so for all the organizations who help kids, I think we need to help our parents. And I strongly recommend that book. She gives 5 ways to get rid of all the wrong things we receive. And again, it's not about blaming parents, but it's about how we can do better now. And something I learned along my path is that when I actually started to awaken is when I went back to study in psychology, and we started to talk about attachment patterns, and my anxiety started to rise and rise, and the child wounds were resurfaced. About 2 years later, when the Me Too phenomenon started, I watched a webinar from Icarus Center, which is the only, I would say, mental health organization which doesn't have any influence by any lobbies or companies. Anyway, they're very good, and they make webinars, and they made a webinar about what is trauma. And the first time I listened to the webinar, I started to sneeze and sneeze and sneeze. I was sneezing for half an hour, and the only way to stop the sneezing was to put cold water all over my body. So then I understood, okay, I went through trauma. The next time they explain on another webinar, they explain what is a trauma. And actually, a trauma can be as simple as not allowing your kid to cry, to be sad, to be angry, to be frustrated. So if you push down all those emotions about your kids, of course they will suffer anxiety, they might suffer concentration problem, aggression with other kids, maybe difficulties learning. It's all grounded in the emotional basis we receive as kids. So basically, maybe many kids have been traumatized, and as adults they don't know. And in my case, I never really remembered my childhood and didn't know why. So now I remember, and it's probably because it was so painful that my brain just shut it off. And I've read that this is already considered PTSD. And here for the last 3 years I've been trying to get help in Quebec, and I've been laughed at by my doctor, and she's told me, well, you look good. I have cases of soldiers who come back from war. And actually my condition is quite similar to what the soldiers have. It's called complex PTSD. It's possible to heal, and probably the only way to really recover my brain abilities, my memory, concentration, everything, is through EMDR, which I cannot afford right now. And I just went to a jiu-jitsu class, and just following all the movements that had to be done. Actually, it was a trial because I cannot afford to go to a class. It was so overwhelming that my head was spinning. And for the last 3 years, basically, for those who are trying to understand why I'm not there, I've been living in constant fear. So of course it takes some time for the fear to be removed of the body, and being constantly traumatized like this is more damaging for the brain than, this is what the scientific people are saying, than actually surviving physical trauma or sexual abuse. And yesterday I went in a community center and I saw that everywhere there were pamphlets about if you need help, if you were a victim of abuse in a relationship with your husband, like physical hurt or sexual hurt, but there was nothing for victim of gaslighting, psychological harassment, psychological abuse from sociopath, narcissist. And this is what I've been going through. And because I didn't receive any help, I didn't know that I had to address this wound in order to stop meeting these people, because until this is addressed, you always keep meeting these people. And in the next video I will tell you how to recognize them, spot them, what actually to avoid absolutely, and how to win against them and making them think that they won. This is how you win. So yes, I think conscious parenting is really the future. And so this is something I've been reflecting on and I wanted to share with you, and also share with you what is a trauma and what is the result. You see the result within me. And you know, for the past 3 years, every time I went through a hospital or any therapist, they were a lot of them asked, what trauma do you have? I don't understand. Which trauma? So every time, and this is something I read, every time you are denied help, you are constantly re-traumatized. And there are also shelters, places where women who are victims of physical violence can go. But there's nothing for us, for those who are victims of traumas resulting from our parents. And it's actually very hard because we're completely isolated from all those that we thought were the ones who love us. So not only are you completely isolated from your family and you have to grieve alone, you have to deal with the results of your brain which is completely wrecked. And you have to survive extreme scarcity, which is also a trauma. And I'm not saying it's not possible. Right now, everything I have to tackle in a day is like, my day are so full. I'm like a CEO, just trying to work on myself and handle all the situations I have to. And I have to make the impossible possible. And sometimes people ask me, why don't you do that? Why don't you do that? But sometimes I am technically unable. But I've become so creative. And the good thing is that when you lose everything, you kind of have nothing to lose anymore. And I've met an amazing author in Indigo who said her book is about how you have to keep pushing even when you're in pain. And this is true, but you also need to rest and heal. And yeah, it really feels, my life feels like a CEO. And you know, awakening is really messy, but because you are at a hard place, and this is something I read at Lone Wolf, on Lone Wolf website, maybe it's because you're doing something good. 2 days ago, I was doing an amazing meditation by Victor Oddo, O-D-D-O, about bringing light in your body, and I did it twice in a day, and I felt amazing. I was so calm. And the next day I woke up with nausea. I felt like vomiting because probably because, you know, there was some release. So releasing years of fear and traumas is a process, you know, it's a process. Everything is a process in life. And also I want to address the fact that in order to be happy, we don't necessarily have to have millions of dollars. There's different ways to be happy. And so yes, spiritual and rich is possible, but I think living like a monk is also a great way to find your own happiness, because you don't have any distraction and you can really focus on hearing yourself, healing yourself. you know, doing all the work there needs to be done. And this place I just moved in, I have an amazing view on a park. And the funny thing is that on the kitchen, there are tons of butterfly there. And since January, I've been drawing butterflies, and now I know that I'm finally becoming the butterfly, getting out of the his little comfortable thing he was, pushing the limits. So I think it's good to see, you know, a real journey. So I'm gonna wish you an amazing weekend for those of you who are on vacation this weekend. I think it's the Thanksgiving for some, and hopefully, yes, you enjoy your day, whatever you're going through, whether it is a challenge, you know. Life is a mystery, you know. So we do all we can, and we have to be compassionate with ourselves. We have to be true with ourselves. Stop lying to ourselves, and yeah, be compassionate. Do what you can and love yourself. Try as best as you can. Bye.